working to end U.S. support for Israel's illegal 43-year military occupation of the Palestinian West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza Strip, and working to change U.S. policy to support human rights, international law, and equality in Israel-Palestine. We have been organizing a multi-year campaign to both raise awareness about and advocate for an end to U.S. military aid to Israel in general, and a campaign of boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Caterpillar in particular. Now, Caterpillar offers us an excellent case study in the effects of U.S. military aid to Israel on Palestinian civilians, which Maria did such an excellent job of articulating. But by no means are the processes and mechanisms and laws which I will describe for the tribunal in regard to the transfer of Caterpillar bulldozers from the United States to Israel, is it unique? It's not unique. In fact, it's the standard operating procedure for how all weapons are transferred to Israel. And it's not only the big ticket items that were mentioned by John at the outset of this session. It's the very small yet crucial components of weaponry that sustain and enable Israel's illegal military occupation and human rights abuses of Palestinians, which form such a crucial component of the U.S. military aid package to Israel. According to the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, over the last 10 years, more than half of innocent Palestinians who have been killed by the Israeli military have been killed by small guns and by bullets in a very personal, very intimate way. And the United States literally provides Israel with tens of thousands of these guns every year, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of the actual bullets every year. What I would like to highlight in my testimony is not only the corporate complicity, but the U.S. governmental complicity in marketing, approving, and financing these weapons transfers to Israel. At every stage of this process, the U.S. government is complicit in the transfer of these weapons. In the United States, the President submits a budget request to Congress. And in his next budget request, which will go to Congress in January or February of this year, President Obama will propose a record $3.075 billion in military aid to Israel, a record level. Congress, at every level, has the opportunity to amend this budget request, add to it, subtract from it, as Representative McKinney knows from her service in the U.S. Congress. But beyond just the presidential and the congressional approval of this military aid to Israel, there are also opportunities for the executive branch agencies to put a stop to these sales, because the Department of State, the equivalent of Foreign Ministry, approves each and every contract and each and every sale. And the Department of Defense, or the Pentagon, implements the transfer of the weapons. And what we know is that there are myriad opportunities for any one of these institutions to either formally or informally stop the delivery of these weapons if it chooses to do so. And I would say that these institutions must do so according not only to international law and human rights standards, but according to the U.S. domestic law itself. We in the United States have provisions that are supposed to prevent U.S. weapons from being misused to commit human rights abuses anywhere in the world. The Arms Export Control Act states that weapons can be used for one of only two purposes, either for internal security or for legitimate self-defense. And I will leave it to the distinguished members of the jury to determine whether they believe that Israel is using these weapons for internal security or for legitimate self-defense. Beyond that, the Foreign Assistance Act regulates all forms of U.S. aid to Israel, and I quote from it in the written testimony that I provided, but I'll say it here for the benefit of those listening. The Foreign Assistance Act states no assistance may be provided to the government of any country which engages in a consistent pattern of gross violations of internationally recognized human rights. I will again leave it to the members of the distinguished jury to determine whether Israel is indeed guilty of a pattern of gross violations of internationally recognized human rights. According to the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, since September 2000, Israel has killed more than 3,000 innocent Palestinian civilians who took absolutely no part in hostility. Of those fatalities, 21 were killed in the process of home demolitions, which Maria described, 7 of whom were children. The vast majority of these deaths are attributable to the U.S. military aid that is provided to Israel. Now, despite the fact that this military aid is paid for by U.S. taxpayers, information on the corporations involved and the weapons transferred, as Representative McKinney knows from her time in Congress, is a highly guarded state secret, which is very, very difficult to unearth. Finding out the corporations that are involved in this process is an extremely opaque process. So to be honest to the distinguished members of the jury, we simply don't know either the total amounts or value of Caterpillar bulldozers that have been transferred to Israel over the last 10 years or over any course of years. We do have some estimates based on documents that Caterpillar supplied to the U.S. District Court that Maria spoke about earlier. In 2001, we know that Caterpillar had a contract for 50 of the D9 bulldozers valued at $32.6 million, according to documents supplied by Caterpillar itself. But this may just be the tip of the iceberg. And we have reason to believe that many more bulldozers have been transferred at U.S. taxpayer expense. But, and this goes back to something which was said yesterday, validating the importance of these types of public campaigns to put pressure on these corporations and these governments is the fact that we may actually be seeing some forward progress on this campaign finally, as was revealed in the Israeli media just a few weeks ago on October 25th, when it was reported that Caterpillar was delaying the delivery of $50 million worth of D9 bulldozers to the Israeli military. Now, this is a potential bright spot, and I think it's important to point out that Caterpillar sells these bulldozers for business reasons. They would not hold up a delivery of bulldozers unless the U.S. government forced them to hold up the delivery of these bulldozers. And we have been trying very hard to determine exactly what is going on behind the scenes. And we're getting one story from Caterpillar, another from the Department of Defense, and the third from the State Department. None of them match up. But we do know that something very significant is going on, because the State Department has refused to deny the stories that deliveries have been suspended, and when I called to talk to the official in charge of the